As we mentioned, the president's tweets reacting to the violence in Minnesota are in the spotlight and under attack. Flagged with a warning label from Twitter for what they say in glorifying violence, and folks on the left are criticizing the president now for trying to help calm the situation. We are joined by our company, Republican strategist Sery and liberal commentator and editor-in-chief of the National Memo, Joe Conason. Thanks both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Joe, let me start with you for a second. I read the quote and the tweet from the president, and I looked at that as an attempt to reach out and say, I want to make sure that we quell the violence, we don't have any riots. I honestly thought that the Twitter thing on it, I didn't know until I read it back, like this idea of glorifying violence. I don't get how it's glorifying violence. You can disagree with it, but I just don't get the glorifying. He talks about when the shooting and when the looting begins, there's a ton of riots going on. And we've seen this in the past, and he's saying, I'm going to send in the military. That would, in my mind, be the opposite of glorifying it. Do you think this is a bridge too far?
Oh, I don't know about glorifying it, Sean. I think he was flip. It was a flip comment. It harkens back in history to a riot years ago when a police commander made a comment like that, and it was taken as a threat against the African-American community in Florida. I don't know if the president knew that, but it came off in the wrong tone, I would say. It was a bad contrast with what he had said earlier, which I thought was unusually sensitive for him when he said he had watched the video and been upset by it. And I think that was actually a helpful thing for him to say. And then to react the way he did to the violence, which was obviously wrong, I think was not helpful. Hopefully we're now going to see a change in Minneapolis because the offending cop has been arrested, which is a good development.
Obviously, I don't think any of us have ever met George Floyd, so I don't know what he would have wanted or not. But I have a hard time thinking that what he would have wanted in any way, shape, or form is to see the city that he was living in get torn apart like this. And so the riots and the violence don't seem to me something that we should be condoning or accepting. Yes, protest. Yes, have your voice heard. But I think that when you're destroying public property, burning things and injuring people, Sery, that this is not what I don't think anybody would want.
Yeah, I think, Sean, what you're saying is the same parallel analysis that we are all having. I mean, the first part of it is that we don't know what it's like to face the systemic racial inequality that George Floyd felt, Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, the young lady in Louisville, or Eric Garner 5 years ago when the New York City police officers killed him, even though he then cried out, I can't breathe. But when we look at racial inequality and we try to figure out as a country how to fix it, we then have to ask the other part of the question, which is, can you fight injustice with an equivalent injustice? And what we are seeing in Minneapolis with these rioters and these looters is that they are destroying not big businesses, but they are destroying small businesses. They are assaulting women in wheelchairs. There was actually a gentleman that was killed by these rioters and looters. So we have to ask ourselves, can you fight racial injustice by then inflicting harms on other? And I think this is where President Trump was trying to say that we live in a society where law and order allows us to flourish. And the United States has flourished despite racial inequality because we enforce laws. And we have to, even though we know that the world is not always fair.
Yeah, well, obviously the governor of Minnesota has echoed that and asking Minneapolis to have peaceful protest. But Joe, I want to go back to something you said and show you what a recent quote that Al Sharpton said. He said that Trump tries a new response after George Floyd's death. This is the first race-tinged case that I've ever heard him address as president. And he went on to say, so therefore, people can't be upset when people feel that it's empty words because it's so out of character. It goes on to say Sharpton credited both the magnitude of outrage and response to Floyd's death as well as the election for the changed approach, but he doubted many black voters will be swayed with any approach they may see as too little, too late. When I read this, I was a little disheartened because something that we had Pastor Scott say on our show yesterday was the change that he saw in the racial divide is that you have white people and black people joining together to say this is absolutely wrong. What happened to George Floyd was absolutely not acceptable in our country. But when you have a black leader like Al Sharpton coming out and saying, well, it's too late now. It's too late for President Trump to change his tone and try to help here. Is that helping at all? And is that the way you think the black community might be taking this, that his words have just gone void?
Well, I've known Al Sharpton for a long time in New York, and I've always been a bit of a Sharpton skeptic, I will say. But I should also add that as a pastor himself, I think Reverend Sharpton should know it's never too late for somebody to change. If the president changed overnight his attitudes towards race, towards the Mexicans he once characterized as rapists, towards the Central Park Five who he wanted to have electrocuted even though they were innocent, that would be a good thing. And he would deserve to be taken at his word. So when he said he was disturbed by watching George Floyd be killed by that cop, I think I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the president was really upset by that. As little empathy as he's shown sometimes, and in spite of the fact that he said a lot of racially, insightful things in the past. So I don't agree with Reverend Sharpton. As far as the politics of it are concerned, I think he's probably right. Most black voters are not going to support President Trump based on his long record towards them. But it's still a good thing if he says, listen, we can't tolerate this kind of police violence. And my Justice Department is going to look into it, which they actually are doing. And I think that's good, too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I absolutely. I mean, it was sad in a way. I mean, to echo what Lindsay's saying, that this kind of dovetailed right into politics, right? I mean, the idea of you saying this is how black voters are going to respond. I agree with you, Joe, that this is an opportunity. If this is what it took to get you on board to recognize what's going on, then I think the more people that hear that message and that understand what's happening and these fears that exist, then the better, because we need to. We need to have everyone walk out of this understanding. The thing that I thought was really unique about this circumstance, and it'll be interesting how it goes out this weekend, is normally these riots and protests are in response to the person, the officer or whomever, not being prosecuted in some way. So the question is, now that this officer's been arrested, will this quell the riots and the violence? Time will see. And obviously, we hope to check in with you guys next week and see where we are and continue this conversation. Thank you both for being here and giving us your insight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. Well, when we return, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has been praised in the media for his handling of the pandemic. We're going to tell you the real story and the tragedy that's actually happening in that very state's nursing homes. Assemblywoman and former New York mayoral candidate Nicole Malatokis is here with the details. Plus, later, Benny joins us to take his memes of the week and take us down a notch into the weekend.